It's an honor to stand here before you today to receive this award. I've dedicated my career to understanding racial inequality. I'm a social psychologist using a wide variety of methods and populations. I've conducted numerous studies documenting the power of race to dictate perception and behavior, even as we remain blind to its operation and to the severity of its consequences. My research is driven not only by my curiosity about human behavior, but also by my desire to address pressing social problems. Much of my current research has focused on race, policing, and criminal justice. I have a long-standing interest in the ways that social perception can shape visual perception, a relationship that appears in high relief in the context of criminal justice. Simply exposing people to black faces can facilitate their detection of crime objects. Prompting people to think of violent crime can lead them to look towards black faces and away from white faces. Prompting police officers to think of shooting, arresting, and capturing leads their eyes to settle on black faces. Moreover, officers judge blacks whose faces are more stereotypically black as more criminal than those with less stereotypical features. And although looking black is not a crime, jurors are more likely to deliver a death sentence to black defendants who are judged to have more stereotypically black features than those who are judged less stereotypically black, at least when their victims are white. Just as the blackness of a defendant can increase people's desire to punish, so too does the blackness of the penal institution increase their acceptance of punitive criminal justice policies. Over several decades, punitive criminal justice policies have both dramatically increased the incarceration rate and exacerbated racial disparities in incarceration. As we know today, although blacks represent about 13% of the US population, they comprise nearly 40% of the prison population. In more recent studies, I've manipulated the perceived racial composition of prisons and have found that when voters are prompted to believe that the prison population is more black, they show more support for punitive criminal justice policies, not less. Yes, I'm a social psychologist. I'm also a descendant of slaves and of sharecroppers. My people are from Alabama, yet by the time King led the march across the state from Selma to Montgomery to push for voting rights, my people were long gone. They moved to Cleveland, Ohio, to escape the terror of the Jim Crow South, to embrace the promise of the North to protect them. I was born in Cleveland in 1965, in the year of the Voting Rights Act, in the wake of the Civil Rights Movement, and the first generation of those who would be later incarcerated at unprecedented numbers. Today, we speak about Supreme Court decisions delivering a threat to the Voting Rights Act of 1965. Tonight, I want to remind us that this threat not only comes from the court, but from the racial disparities that exist in our prisons. In a recent study, I found that simply reminding Alabama voters of extreme racial disparities in incarceration pushes them to be more supportive of voter ID laws, laws that are threatening the voting rights of minorities across the South. Our criminal justice policies have begun to influence people's support for basic civil rights policies. To make the world a fairer place, we need to fight the extreme racial disparities that exist, that have emerged in the criminal justice arena. Those disparities influence our psyches, they fill us with bias, they reduce the probability that we'll take action, they sap our hope. And speaking of hope, And speaking of action, I'd like to thank the Equal Justice Society for all the work that they do. I'd like to thank them for recognizing me with this award. I'd like to thank my collaborators and colleagues for the role that they've played in shaping the research that I've been able to produce. I'd like to thank my husband for his support and for his faith in me. And finally, I'd like to acknowledge my parents. They both died when they were just in their 50s. Yet while they were here on this earth, they moved, they worked, they fought until the bitter end. And here I stand, ready, honored to do the same. Thank you.